A very good evening, all. I'm Aditi Lama with the Thursday night edition of South Asia News, Vision of Asia. We are coming to you from a studio in New York City. Welcome to the show. Let's begin the episode taking a look at the coronavirus pandemic and its impact. The world has surpassed 121 million cases of COVID-19 with more than 2.5 million deaths. Here in the United States, we're at more than 538,000 COVID-19 deaths with more than 29.6 million cases. Today, the European Union's drug regulator said that the AstraZeneca vaccine was safe and effective, a finding that officials hope will alleviate concerns about rare side effects involving blood clots, which has led to several countries halting the use of the vaccine. This vaccine is not available in the United States yet, but a large-scale study has been finished here, and the company is expected to ask for an FDA emergency authorization in the coming weeks. In politics, President Joe Biden addressed the nation on the progress his administration has made in reaching the president's goal of administering 100 million vaccines into the arms of Americans in his first 100 days in office. This comes as the White House prepares for a potential fourth surge of the coronavirus with more transmissible and deadly variants spreading across the nation. Meanwhile, the US-Mexico border is facing an incredibly stressful situation where unaccompanied migrant children are crossing the border. More on this and the coronavirus pandemic, we present to you tonight frontline healthcare workers, political commentators, and women leaders on the show. Here are the headlines. Unaccompanied migrant children cross US-Mexico border, featuring political commentator Rohit Vyas, New Jersey. Emergency Department nurse Namrata Ramani shares frontline experience on coronavirus pandemic, Hackensack Meridian Health. Inspiring South Asian American women host virtual panel discussion on economic impact of COVID-19, New Jersey. It's time for a short break on Vision of Asia South Asian News segment. We'll be back shortly. And welcome back. I'm Aditi Lama, and this is Thursday night episode of South Asian News with Vision of Asia. Frontline healthcare workers are the backbone of an effective healthcare system and play a critical role in providing services to patients and also connecting families and communities to the healthcare system. They work in providing immunizations, treat common health issues, and families rely on them as trusted sources of information who have valuable skills in preventing, treating, and managing. During the COVID-19 pandemic, these frontline workers have become key in providing critical care and often have been the only communication sources for COVID-19 patients and their families. Such a frontline worker, proud of the work she does, is nurse Namrata Ramani from the Hackensack Meridian Health. Nurse Ramani worked in the intensive care unit during the first surge of coronavirus, attending to some of the most ill patients. She now works in the emergency department, still taking care of sick COVID-19 patients, and is dedicated to providing support and comfort for her patients. Here is a part of our conversation with Nurse Ramani on her experience being a frontline hero. Let's take a look. Namrata, usually nurses anyways have such a close interaction with patients. Being in the ICU of COVID and the story you just described to us, actually moving a person has a lot of physical contact. This may be a cliched question, but did you feel scared at that point when you were so close to the patients? Or do you still feel scared?
Honestly, I think, personally, I never had any fear about it. I think there was a point where, we recognized that we had team members that were scared, that there were people who had kids at home or had older family members at home, and they were scared that they would bring it home with them. And a lot of us, who didn't have those reservations, I guess, stepped up, and we were like, you know what, you have family at home that you guys are worried about, let us take care of these patients. And I happened to be one of those people who was younger, didn't have kids at home that I was worried about, I wasn't living with elderly people. So I, didn't feel as scared to do my due diligence and take care of those people. But there definitely were team members, and I empathize with them because it was terrifying at the beginning, not knowing what could happen, what if you got sick, if you had your own health conditions that you were worried about. It was scary. And then we also had team members that we saw getting sick. So it was also scary to see some of those things. But I think, at the end of the day, we recognize that that's part of the job description. We didn't sign up for a pandemic, but it came to us and we needed to deal with it. So a lot of our team members just stepped up and did what we had to do. So being close to the patient, it didn't really register, I guess, in my head that we were so close to them and putting ourselves at risk all the time.
You got your second dose of the vaccine today itself, and congratulations on that. Do you feel more confident? Do you feel more stronger going into the emergency department now?
I feel the same. Getting vaccinated didn't change the fact that we still have to wear our masks. We still have to do our due diligence. We still have to make sure that we're keeping ourselves protected. I do feel a sense of kind of like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Now that we do have this vaccine out, that I have been vaccinated, that family members are starting to get vaccinated. It feels like there's a moment that we can actually take a sigh of relief that there is finally something that we have to kind of help us combat this rather than just doing kind of like hand-to-hand combat with this virus. So it's definitely a breath of relief to be able to have it, but I don't look at it as a solution, like 100% solution, and now we can kind of roam free and not have to worry about the virus. It's just part of the toolbox for us to help fight this off.
Right. Namrata, when you're looking at these patients of COVID-19, there are very strict protocols in most hospitals in which they barely get to see their family right now, where, when the cases are coming down. Last year, around this time, nobody was allowed to visit them. Nobody could see their own family members. They were pretty much alone in the ICUs. You were a family for those people, all the nurses. You were the only people they were interacting with. How much pressure did you feel of that? And how did you get through those emotions of taking care of these very ill patients who may not have made it through?
Yeah, that was definitely very hard. I know I had one coworker who mentioned that when she was in the COVID ICU, I think she started off with about 4 patients at the start of her shift, and she ended with just 1 because the other 3 had passed away. I think the toll that would take on us to recognize that we were the last people that these people were going to be around, last people who, we were the last voices that they were hearing, we were the last people holding their hands, the last people taking care of them. It never, left the back of our mind. Like that was constantly something that we were thinking about. It was pretty much at the forefront of our minds when we were taking care of these patients. And we did do everything that we could to make sure family could still, video call them. And so these people can still hear the voices of their family members. But it was hard knowing that, people were this sick and family members couldn't hold their hand, couldn't comfort them, couldn't see them. I know we did our best to try to update family members as much as we could, as often as we could. But even that is hard when it gets busy and family members were calling us trying to get updated and they couldn't get an answer because we were dealing with so many other sick people. It was hard. And I know trying to be, especially the hospital where I work, we have a lot of Latinos who are only Spanish speaking. So the language barrier and the cultural barriers were also there for us to try to take care of these patients and their families. And it was definitely overwhelming at a time, but I think, our team was resilient and they found very creative ways of making sure that we were still communicating with family, making sure that they understood what was happening. And then, I remember watching one of my colleagues, every patient that she took care of in the ICU, she had a full conversation with them. And that was just what the nurses did on a regular basis. We would tell every patient what we were doing to them. We would talk to them. We would play music, just to try to bring some life back into the room, because these people, as much as they, can't speak to us, they couldn't talk to us, they couldn't tell us what was going on. Yeah. That doesn't mean that they're not there. And all of the nurses that I work with down in the ICU were cognizant of that all the time, that they interacted with the patients in a way that still made them feel like a person. And that was, I think, important, especially when we told our the family members that's how we were taking care of them, that, we're still talking to them, they're still hearing our voices, they know that they're loved, that they're being taken care of, and that, a lot of the nurses would speak motivational quotes to the patients, you're going to get better, you're going to get out of this, you're doing so great today, stuff like that, just to keep them uplifted if they can register anything that we were saying.
Let's now take a look at ISAW, Inspiring South Asian American Women. ISAW is a non-profit organization founded by women across New Jersey, each with a unique South Asian experience, and seeks to bring other Asian American women together to promote community engagement and public service in the state. The organization consists of some of the leading South Asian American women trailblazers in a variety of fields, bringing their expertise and vision for women and the future by promoting leadership, commitment, and involvement in politics and more. ISAW aspires to serve as a bridge and support network for the advancement of our community's women so that there are equal opportunities and space for them. On this, recently, ISAW brought together a virtual panel discussion on the economic impact of the pandemic on South Asians and other communities of color and the path to move forward to help small businesses, which are the backbone of the economy. Here are some highlights from the virtual panel discussion.
Tonight, we will be learning about the economic impact of COVID, but a little bit about ISAW first. ISAW was founded in 2017 to create a platform for South Asian American women interested in greater civic engagement. At ISAW, we are driven by a single mission to empower South Asian American women, effect change in their communities. As part of our mission, we strive to increase awareness on issues impacting South Asian American women. We help mobilize South Asian American women to increase their involvement in public service. Now, coming to tonight's focus, the coronavirus 2019 COVID-19 pandemic has created both a public health crisis and an economic crisis in the United States. The pandemic has disrupted lives, created a global economic slowdown. It has been claimed that more than 3 times the American lives that were lost in the Vietnam War have been lost due to this virus. According to researchers, the economic crisis is unprecedented in its scale. The pandemic has created a demand shock, a supply shock, and a financial shock all at once.
I would like to think that, or hope rather, that due to everybody being able to get the vaccine and being safer and being able to expose themselves, of course, still taking precautions, in public environments, that there will be an increase in business and sales, that the market picks up. I think right now we're in that kind of phase where we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So it's a guessing game for everybody. I think with the new stimulus package that was just passed, hopefully that will also help. I'm sure there's a lot of new things in there. I'm still looking into it myself to see what there is. But hopefully there will be things in there that will be helping people to gear up their businesses, help them to move forward through this. I'm hoping that the worst of the worst is behind us. I know, Jonathan, you mentioned that maybe there might be another slowdown or something that happens with regards to the market, which is possible as well. But I think right now people are in that stage where if they're able to, they want to take advantage of the low interest rates because they don't know what's going to happen with that. People are itching to travel and, go places once they get their vaccines. And so I hope that that's something that will, become a positive and lead to better things in the future.
I'm going to 110% endorse that view. I don't, one thing we've seen is those who don't need assistance but have received it have essentially been saving that money. And then those who need it have been spending it. So it's, the money is multiplying through the economy already, but there's also a pretty substantial chunk of that isn't. Mm-hmm. And it's also likely, what President Biden has been pretty clear about is that the American Rescue Plan is part one. And supposedly there's an American, I think, recovery plan that I thought he was supposed to announce in February, but it's now mid-March, which is supposed to be more infrastructure based. So that's also going to have if that passes, that's also going to have a pretty heavy impact on whatever a recovery winds up looking like. That said, if we're talking in the economic side, I can't say that this is going to happen in 2021 or who knows when. All I'm going to say is that it's going to be heavily dependent on how well people take to their personal responsibility to get themselves vaccinated and to slow the spread through other means until we can reach some level of widespread vaccination. But if all goes well with the way the monetary system looks set up, potential even more assistance on the way, if everyone does their part, it's not a stretch to just remind everyone that the Roaring '20s followed the Spanish flu.
Right. This has been, and Pinky, any last thoughts on your prediction?
No, and I agree with, you both said it so eloquently, and I 100% agree that I think there is, light at the end of this tunnel for all of us. And you just hear conversations of folks that are talking about the vaccinations and those that have gotten, and you hear an air of optimism in the folks that have gotten vaccinated already. So you see that they're feeling more comfortable. So I do see that. I think when it comes to the economics of all of this, that we should see improvements. And as people have just gotten adjusted and made whatever changes they needed to their businesses, right? There's more people that are, there was that stage of denial, right? Whenever something happened. So there was that, people have gotten past that, and those have gotten into the place of, okay, it's time to head down and figure this out and take some action. So I think we're in that place for a lot of people. So simply because of that alone, I think we're also going to just see some great recovery coming our way. So that's what I'm hoping for our economy and for everyone around here.
I think that's a perfect place to end the panel on such a fantastic, happy, positive note. I hope that the fates listen to all three of you, and 2022 becomes our own Roaring '20s, if you will, without the Great Depression after that. But I just wanted to thank all of you for an incredibly informative, helpful panel discussion. COVID-19's economic impact on women has been extraordinary, and it has been exceptionally impactful for small business owners, oftentimes who are women who work out of their homes. And having this sort of conversation, I hope, gives our viewers a roadmap, and it gives them hope and a roadmap as to the relief efforts that are underway and the options they have to give them hope that this pandemic is not is not a deal killer, if you will, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and there are options for our community, especially, and women in general, to take advantage of. I think this particular demographic, and I speak about women, tend to sort of be the last, if you will, to be served. And having this roadmap is very helpful. And as Pinky eloquently put it, the South Asian community in particular feels a sense, there's a cultural sort of nuance to the impact that they've felt. And I hope this panel discussion has given them a clear roadmap about ways to get back on their feet. Thank you all for an exceptionally wonderful panel discussion.
While it's time for the short break on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community, stay with us. And welcome back. I am Aditi Lama, and this is Vision of Asia South Asian news segment. In politics, a huge crisis is facing the nation, with thousands of ethnic-accompanied migrant children crossing the U.S. border trying to seek asylum. President Joe Biden is dealing with a growing tension regarding the treatment of these children and the facilities they have been placed in at the border. They are all there without their parents and have made this intense journey on their own. Homeland Security Secretary testified before a House committee about this growing influx of children and continued to tell everyone that the border currently is not open, and urged these migrant children and families to not make the risky decision of crossing the border. The White House has said that it will address this in an effective and humane manner. On this and much more, we spoke with ITV Gold senior political commentator Mr. Rohit Vyas, who provided much insight. Here is veteran journalist Rohit Vyas. Meanwhile, right now, we are looking at a really big news that's concerning many in the nation, which has to do with immigration, the border crisis. on the southern side of the country. There are thousands of children that have come unaccompanied, going through whatever circumstances they were, and they're trying to seek a safe shelter, a safe place in the country. They're saying that hundreds of immigrant children are coming in pretty much every day. Could you describe to us what this entire situation exactly is, and what needs to be done to truly help this crisis?
Well, first of all, this crisis, should have been expected and was expected. There is a lot of violence down there in many of the South American countries: Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico, of course, with the drug cartels and the like. The pandemic, of course, takes a fair share of the blame to drive the economies downward over there. Traditionally, you've had mass migration from the southern border because of poverty, because of victimization, child trafficking, things like that. And so this is probably the worst crisis in 20 years. I think Alejandro Mayorkas, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, has already said this is the worst crisis involving specifically children in 20 years that the U.S. has faced. Also, the manpower simply can't handle the number of people coming in across the border. They're desperate people. There are thousands of them desperate. And when they crush the border like this, it is extremely difficult to process so many people. The administration is doing its best to expel, deport immediately all the adults that are coming in. Children, there's a policy to hold them for 72 hours. Anything beyond that is illegal, a violation of American law. They then have to be handed over to the Department of Human Services, which is equipped to handle specifically children that are here unaccompanied by their parents, etc. But the question then remains as to, where's the manpower? Where's the manpower to handle this? And how do you just go and seal the border completely? That would be cruel, according to many. It would be deemed extremely cruel, because some of these people are really fleeing extreme poverty, extreme violence. Now, the Homeland Security Secretary clearly blamed the Trump administration, saying that they demolished the asylum process, which means at the border there's no one to process asylum seekers. That means the infrastructure has been completely destroyed. And he claims that the Biden administration is now trying to rebuild as this crisis develops. It is a big crisis. And anything at a border of a nation anywhere in the world can be a huge crisis, but specifically here in the United States, with so many countries going through the throes of violence, the throes of a pandemic, economic devastation, you can't help but see so many more, and it was expected that there would be so many more children coming in. Now, you might ask the question, why so many children? I think it's a lot of parents down there who must have said, all right, kids, you go ahead, make a dash for the border. At least you'll have a better life than some of us. So it's basically desperation. Right. I think at some point, my prediction is they're going to have to call in Army assistance, something that the Trump administration had sought at one time.
Well, this wraps up our show for the night. Please send us your suggestions and get your voices and organizations on our show. Email us on events@itvgold.com or follow us on Facebook at itvgold. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for free access to many of our popular shows. Thank you for joining us tonight from Queens, New York. This is Vision of Asia, and I am Aditi Lamba. Take care and be well.